Distinguished Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. How many of you out there have ever used a computer to do a trading transaction? Buying or selling a stock or a mutual fund? Okay, not too many. All right, there you go. So for those who have, you realize the efficiencies of doing such a thing, of trading electronically versus the old-fashioned way of, say, calling a broker and asking to buy or sell stocks for you, costing you $100, $200 just for that call. Now you can get it done for $5 or $10. There's other efficiencies involved as well. They have things like the markets being tighter. Back in, not too long ago, things were traded in eighths, halves. Now they're traded in pennies, so the spreads are much tighter. One of the best things, though, is just be able to trade pretty much when you want or wherever you want. You could trade, California, Europe, wherever. You can just put your orders in and be done. So these efficiencies are wonderful. They've taken the price down for us as the customers, and they've given us freedom and flexibility. Some of these efficiencies, though, need to be reevaluated and thought of during situations like what took place on May 6th of this year. That was when the flash crash took place, and the markets in the United States and internationally went down precipitously. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about what the flash crash is and the possible causes of the flash crash. A flash crash is when a market goes down very quickly, plunges to levels, and then quickly comes back up. And that's pretty much what happened this year, May 6, 2010, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 600 points within minutes just to come back minutes later. Now, if you look at your handout I gave you, it might give you a better technical representation of what actually took place that day. During this day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average moved almost 1,000 points to the downside. And that would be the largest in its record of moving on an intraday basis for that day. So, at one point during the day, nearly $1 trillion in market value was lost. I mean, that was not just the Dow, but that was everything. That was all the U.S. equity markets. So $1 trillion evaporated in one day, came back, obviously. So other individual stocks were also affected. Companies, like I'm sure you've heard of, have you heard of Exelon and Accenture? Those companies traded as low as a penny. Apple, Hewlett-Packard, traded over $100,000 that day. Now, you can imagine that these trades probably wouldn't stand, but with companies like this happening to you, start to wonder what's happening here and how are these things being priced. Well, eventually, I'm not quite sure the answer is how they came up with what were the highs and what were the lows, but they ended up canceling a bunch of these trades and saying they were erroneous. Some of them stuck, though. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of the trades that took place on these indexes, like the S&P 500 futures and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, all those trades were stayed. There was no canceled trades. So the people who probably got affected most by these things were people who are in arbitrage, where they're buying and selling, they see price discrepancies. Some of these people here might have said to themselves, hey, look, these stocks are trading for a penny, I'll buy a million shares of these, and then start selling futures against them. And then find out the next day that, oh, those trades are going to be busted, being canceled, and these ones are still good. So, I mean, it could actually ruin anybody who's in that type of business. All right, at this point, I'm sure you're wondering yourself, well, what caused this? Who's responsible for this? One theory that was presented was bad finger error. That's basically when somebody puts an elbow on a keyboard or pushes it too long or something of that nature, which has happened and I've seen it in my career. But also, it could be something as simple as just putting an extra couple zeros on, say, instead of selling 100,000, say 100 million. So that was a possibility as well. Another theory was that it was due to these high-frequency traders, which are something that's very common now, where traders basically come in and they put in these bids and offers below and above current market prices in thousands at a time and 100 millionths of a second being shot in there. Some people say they do it as a way to fake out competitors. Other people think that it's just a way maybe to create, take bandwidth and help clog systems, slow things down for their own benefit. It was later, after researchers looked at it, they proved that, or they didn't prove, but they suspected that they weren't to blame. But they did say that they probably exacerbated the problem during this peak when everything was jammed up and the crisis was occurring. So you have the fat finger, you have the high frequency, but then what's simple? What if there was just a big order, somebody wanted to sell, or people all wanted to sell at once? Why couldn't that be the reason? And at that time, they kind of analyzed trades to kind of look to see what happened. If you're not familiar with S&P 500, is an index of, it's a capitalization weighted index of 500 companies in the United States. And right before the crash took place, somebody sold 75,000 of these things in the E-minis at the Mercantile Exchange. That was documented. I mean, it was a huge move, but it wasn't necessarily something to cause this type of catastrophe. Another guy, a guy who runs a fund called Universa, put in a huge order. He bought thousands of put options. He also wrote the book The Black Swan, which talks about unusual occurrences of large magnitude, ironically. And a lot of times, that negative sentiment comes in at a certain time, and these people who sold these puts to him have to sell futures against him in order to hedge themselves. So that's a possibility as well. I don't know the answer, but I tried putting together things in my mind to see what it was. And it kind of seemed to me it was a confluence of things. That week, what was happening, the main theme of the week seemed to be the Greek crisis, them defaulting on their debt. And people were very nervous about that. And right before it happened, they were showing riots on TV, on CNBC, and it just kind of precipitated. And what I was thinking is happening is people started really just big orders started coming in. The system started getting a little clogged up. And as a result of that, some of these guys, by the way, these high frequency traders, they now compromise 73% of the volume on our US stock markets. So these guys were basically saying, we're used to 100 millionths of a second. And now we have to, we're getting delayed quotes, delayed fills. We don't know what's happening. So, and I talked to some companies that do high frequency trading, and some of them just basically, turned off their computers, or said, you know what, our models aren't designed for this type of system. So massive amount of liquidity dried up. So now you have all these orders, you panic because nobody knows what's what, and the liquidity is dried up, and then you get something like that. Then, obviously when you see a certain opportunity, at some point somebody turns it back on and says, okay, let's get in this game now. So those are possible reasons. But in the end, nobody was to blame. And the good thing, though, is that the exchanges, given the fact they were directly involved, I think they should do something about it. They created certain curves or circuit breakers that take place. So if any company moved, not any company, certain companies are involved, others aren't, but the major ones are, move 10% within a day's trading day, it'll stop for 5 minutes, give it a break, see if buyers come back into the market, assess whether it's a legitimate reason for it coming down or it was some kind of function. And so that was something I think that was good and should have some improvement. So tonight we talked about what a flash crash is and some of the possible causes. So what does this mean for you and me? Well, basically means tread carefully, be vigilant and prudent, and make sure the regulators keep, CFTC and SEC keeps on these high-frequency traders, and make sure that these quote stuffing, as they call it, doesn't affect the bandwidth and the way markets run efficiently and consistently.